As long as it doesn't get all mixed up in the good news, menopause and.
Well, that's good news. You're still here.
But it's a good thing that changed your life.
Yeah,
That,
because that means you're
yeah,
still
it
here.
is. Well, the good news was that I didn't get any more migraines after that. That was the good news. That was great.
Oh my Lord. Well, my
Oh
lovely
God.
ladies, I am glad we are going to end this on a
Yes.
high note. So I'm going to let you all go.
Have a great show.
Thank you so
Have
much.
a good one.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye bye. Wonderful. Okay. Chapearl, you can't hear who? Can you keep speaking, Pastor Yeri? Let me replug this in.
3, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay. All right, everybody. Let me know. Let me know if you can hear now. Chapearl, please. Everybody, let me know if you can hear Pastor Yeri. Okay, great, great, great.
Come on.
Okay, Pastor
You
Yeri, you
good?
can
You need
hear
me to do
now.
another count?
Uh-huh.
Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, great. Can you hear now? Just let us know. Okay. All right. Trying to get these last minute whatever's together is always a thing. Okay. So let me. And how much time do we have here? I think I'm up. All right.
2.5 minutes.
And let me bring this down. All right. Let me bring this down. Okay, great. All right, Pastor. You see they had another shooting, killing.
I did.
I said, okay. It's just heartbreaking. He was pulled over for a traffic stop. Let me see if I can get past her. Okay, I can hear something in the background.
Okay, I can hear something in the back.
Okay. Okay. All right, all right, all right. Okay. And Devin, of course, as soon as you get uh, mm, Dr. Fur holding on, please let me know.
Will do.
Okay. Okay, Pastor Yuri, so you're doing well.
Doing very well, thank you.
Praise the Lord for that. Whew. Okay, let me get these glasses. Okay, let me say hello to everybody. I'm running a little. Well, I'm running right on time. Linda and Brian and Shelby, dear friend in college, Shelby, Linda, Keith Fluid, Carol. I'm going to ask you all to weigh in on some music today because the Sounds of Blackness have given me permission to use their music, and I want to begin to use them as theme music for my show. How about that, Pastor Yuri? So, I'm going to give you all a chance to weigh in on the songs today, okay? And Raphael, hey, sending you much love down there in Brazil, sending you much, 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 much love. And Brian and Kenneth and Makiba and Shirley from Philadelphia and Madeline and Deborah and Melissa and Jarvis, Samantha, Bab, hey, sweetie, Deborah, Brian, how you doing, everybody? Daryl, how are you? We're going to be talking about
10 seconds.
so much has happened. The shooting in Minneapolis, just north of Minneapolis overnight. I mean, yesterday afternoon. The latest on.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. What a way to kick off the morning. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's Monday, April 12th, 2021. That music is from Sounds of Blackness. I want you all to weigh in. Gary Hines from Sounds of Blackness has given me the opportunity to use their music for the show. Isn't that wonderful? And so I want you to let me know. We're going to be playing several songs for you. And we want to know which ones you think fit the show. Okay, so let me know what you're thinking. Aren't they great? We love them, Vandelay. How you doing, sweetie? And so everybody, today on Monday, April 12th, 2021, I'm Santita Jackson coming to you from WCPT 820 in Chicago and AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul. So much is going on in Minneapolis. Thank you, Janet Jackson. What is going on? Oh boy, oh boy. They had another killing, another police killing yesterday. So, of course, we're going to be, while I'm on the show, I'm going to be calling some people up in Minneapolis so they can try and get on the show today so that we can talk about this. What is going on? And this, of course, is just as the prosecution in the Derek Chauvin murder trial is about to wrap up. That's right. The defense of Derek Chauvin is about to begin within the next day or so. Can you believe it? It seems like it's all passed so quickly. So we've got to talk about that, the latest on COVID-19, because that information continues to change overnight. I don't want you to have COVID fatigue. I want you to have COVID information. And what about what happened in Maryland? The Police Bill of Rights. Now, this is something that President Biden, when he was the senator, something that he helped to push. Not only push, he helped to pull it together. 2 weeks after Rodney King was shot, was beaten by the police. He eventually did die. But bless his heart. Then Senator Biden pulled together a police bill of rights. Wow. And so it's very interesting that now Maryland has shut that down. Can't wait to talk with Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, who will be giving us good news, but want to talk with him about that because he's a leader in Maryland all around the country, but he's based in Baltimore. So we got a lot to talk about today, you guys. So let's get to it in Chicago. 62 degrees will be our high, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 47 degrees and showers. The protests have already taken place. Police in the Minneapolis area shot and killed a man, Dante Wright, black man, in the city of Brooklyn Center, just north of Minneapolis, sparking clashes between hundreds of protesters and police officers in an area already on edge during the murder trial of former officer Derek Chauvin. The incident occurred, according to this Guardian report, shortly before 2 p.m. when an officer pulled the vehicle over due to an alleged traffic violation, everybody. It was a traffic violation. Police stated that the driver re-entered the vehicle as officers attempted to take him into custody, and one officer opened fire. The vehicle then traveled several blocks before striking another vehicle, everybody. Wow. Of course, the headline in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune today is that Brooklyn Center police fatally shoot a man in flaming tensions. We will be talking about that. He was just 20 years of age, a father, a son, and he is gone. Traffic violation is why he was pulled over initially, everybody. And then this news. Caron Nazario, a black man. He's also Latino, but they saw that he was black. Okay, and so this happened actually last December. Body camera videos show that Virginia police officers held this Army officer who was in his fatigues at gunpoint. Officer Nazario, was confused as to why police were yelling at him to exit the car last December for not having a permanent rear license plate, according to a federal lawsuit filed this month. And when Nazario told police on December 5th, 2020, that he was, quote, honestly afraid to get out of his car, close quote, the officer replied, yeah, you should be. The Virginia governor has called for an investigation into the police pepper spraying of this officer, and now that officer has been fired. We will see where this is going to go, but we got to talk about that. I want you to call me or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. And in fact, Chicago's on edge because of the killing of this baby, Adam Toledo. I mean, what is going on, everybody? You have got Chicago on edge because now, specifically the Latinx community, but all communities of goodwill are trying to find out what happened with this 13-year-old boy. How and why was he shot and killed by the police? Going to be talking about that today and in days going forward. Now, as we're watching beginning to watch the closing phase of the prosecution's case against Derek Chauvin, his former bosses are lining up to condemn him, and they're saying that policing in America is on trial. Do you think that that is the case? Now, guess what? The controversial defense that could be used in the Chauvin trial is this: excited delirium. Throughout the first phases of this murder trial, the defense attorney, Eric Nelson, has made passing reference to the term excited delirium as he attempts to build a case for his client. He has asked a number of witnesses about the term and may well explore it when the defense gets to present its case. We're going to be finding out what all of that is about. But you know what? I was reading in the Sun Sentinel out of Florida. A former prosecutor, Michael McCullough, said that the Chauvin trial is far from over and far from won. We're going to be talking with our lawyers about that. I also asked Reverend Dr. Todd Geary Esquire about that. Many are saying that China's lack of transparency made this pandemic worse, and that is coming from one of America's top diplomats. Secretary of State Tony Blinken said that we need more transparency from China over the origins of COVID-19. In the meantime, we're finding that rich countries are still continuing to hoard these vaccines. They're shielding pharma monopolies. They're not sharing the information so that these countries can make their own vaccines. Just 0.2% of COVID vaccine doses have gone to poor nations. 0.2%. Interestingly, while you have the 8-day mourning period in England for Prince Philip, guess what? The BBC had blanket coverage until the people said, stop it. That's right. They said, no, put our planned programming back in place. Discuss Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, but we don't want blanket coverage. Isn't that interesting? And congratulations goes to Mr. Matsuyama. Goodness gracious. I don't want to mess up anyone's name. Hideki Matsuyama. Guess what, everybody? He's 29 years of age, the first Japanese man, the first Asian-born player to ever don the green jacket, the only Japanese male to win a major. Of course, Tiger Woods reached out and said how proud he was of him. Everybody said that this will further open up the sport. God bless him. In the meantime, everybody get registered to vote, and let's watch what's going on in Texas. There's a video that shows that the Texas GOP is seeking, quote, an army of volunteers to monitor polls in mostly Black and Hispanic Houston precincts. 10,000 in Houston alone, everybody. Oh, Reverend Dr. Todd Geary Esquire, I need some good news. There is so much going on. You know, I'm shutting down the show yesterday. And then I said, wait a minute, you all had another killing by the police? Up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And it's a lot. It's a lot every day. Every day it's something new and throughout the day. So give me some good news. Help us to get started on our way.
Well, there is, good morning, Santita, to you. There's a whole lot going on, and certainly I've been thinking about this morning's good news with where we are with the trial in Minneapolis, and then the events over the weekend, and then yesterday. And so everyone, please, please, please stay safe. That means a whole lot more than I think we typically think it does, but certainly we hear but there's a lot. The Masters was good. I like to see it in the glass. I was born in Augusta, so looking at Augusta National, because that's all I could do growing up anyway. I had to see it on TV. We couldn't necessarily gain access, not membership, so it's come a long way to have another golfer of color win the majors, so that's good news as well. So since we're in good news mode, even in the midst of a whole lot going on, let me just say to Chicago, Twin Cities, good morning, good morning, good morning to all of you. Time to get going, time to get moving. It's Monday morning. I know it's Monday morning. It can be a little challenging. It's the start of a new week, but it's a new day. Time to get up, time to get moving. Put your feet on the floor. Take a deep breath, breathe in life, fill your lungs. Know that this is a great day, and it's a great day at the very beginning. So get that morning Joe going, whatever that morning beverage might be. Let's get moving. We got some living to do. I wanted to, Santita, this morning talk about changing the game. You know, this is really my time of year between March Madness that ended. We're back in the we're getting ready for NBA playoffs. We saw the women's title, the Masters just ended. There's a whole lot going on. You just finished the Frozen Four. The college hockey tournament just ended. Baseball has gotten started, albeit that's a whole different discussion. We're not going to talk about who's good and who's not, but we'll save that for later. There's always next year. Anyway, but this is a good time. It has me thinking about how we approach games, and I want to talk about approaching the game of life. I want to talk to those who are going to change the game about how they approach life. You're going to change the game this morning, and so actually for maybe the next couple of weeks, I want to talk about game changes. I want to talk about the frame of mind that's required to win at life intentionally, because you are a winner. Let me just start. Let me just give you the hook on the front end, and hopefully you'll stay till the end, because I'm going to give you the climax up front. You are a winner. Because you're a winner, you ought to walk with the mindset of a winner. And the way you do that is we have to make sure that we deprogram and reprogram so that we can actually approach life intentionally. And the first thing is we've got to make sure that we don't replay somebody else's tape, somebody else's message about who we are. Many times we are reacting and responding to messages that we've picked up along the way that don't necessarily align with who we are. Who are you? When you look in the mirror this morning, don't just start focusing on the blemishes. Take a good look at the totality of who you are. You are something awesome to behold. God created you intentionally and without apology. And so with that, there's a story, and the story is, I'm not what I've been through. I am who God has created me to be. What is that message? Don't replay old tapes. Don't listen to what folks have said about you or what folks might be saying about you. What are you saying about yourself? Who am I? Introduce yourself to yourself, and then go introduce yourself to the world. The second thing is something that Mama used to tell me all the time. That every time I would get a little beside myself and start maybe messaging in ways that wasn't helpful, Santita, my mother would tell me, boy, watch your mouth. I want to say to you all this morning, watch your mouth. Watch what you say about yourself. Why? Because the first person to hear your words is you. And whenever we use messages that are not healthy for us, we become complicit in our own hindrance. So I want you to lose negative words. I need you to change your vocabulary. Watch your mouth. And if you have to wash your mouth, if you have to clean up how you talk about yourself, I don't want to hear you say, I can't. I don't want you to say, I won't. I need you to be intentional about making sure that you are laser focused on your purpose and your destiny. You can do all things. With God, all things are possible, even when there's a whole lot of noise. And whatever you do, and this is specifically for my brothers and sisters in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area, in Minnesota, make sure that you focus on who you are and not respond to who the outside messengers are saying you should be. Who are you in this moment? In this moment where the world is watching you, how you respond to a crisis, how you rise to the occasion. Change the game, because you were created to win. Walk in victory. Today is still the best day of your life. And we'll talk soon. Have an awesome day.
Blessings. What a powerful, powerful message today. I know I needed that, and everybody needs that. Dr. Deborah Holden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. There is so much going on here with COVID-19. Now that we are in the midst of this vaccine moment, we are seeing information out of Israel that's saying that, well, maybe this vaccine doesn't work on these new variants as well. But then we're also seeing some other evidence that they might. Good morning, and help us to kind of wend our way through this. As we see 40% of our Marines have declined the vaccine thus far. You know, there's so much going on. How effective are these vaccines, and in what ways are they effective? And what should we be on the lookout for with respect to some just some reactions to them, because I was reading an article this weekend that said that, look, your body reacting, and you've been saying this, that's a good thing. It means that your immune system's kicking in.
Yeah, well, you just asked me a lot of questions all at once. So, yeah, because and most people don't even know, right? Because they'll ask a question, and even in the question, there's some statements that require addressing. So let's break it down a little bit. So you said, how effective are the vaccines? I remind everybody, and good morning, by the way, happy Monday. I remind people that these vaccines, especially the Pfizer and Moderna, all of the early vaccines were tested on the original strain of COVID. As you got toward the end of those clinical trials, we started to see the emergence of variants, which is to be expected, right? Viruses mutate. The type of virus that the coronavirus is broadly, you might expect it to mutate even more than the influenza virus or some other types of viruses. So the fact that these viruses mutate and produce these variant strains, that's not a surprise. But the vaccine is mostly, in the numbers that we mostly got from the vaccine, we're not testing on the effectiveness against these variant strains. Why? Because they didn't even exist when we started the clinical trials, okay? So some of them, the variants started to emerge toward the end of the clinical trials, but you got to think about the numbers and the odds. By the time those variant strains emerge, which, think about it, it has taken, B117 is becoming the dominant strain in the U.S., and that's what we call the UK variant. I think all of these ways of referring to them, we have to come up with a better system to identify them. Because calling it by country very much disparages that country. And then all these numbers don't mean much for people. We probably need a naming system that has something to do with how the virus is different from the original strain. Like B117 might be the high spread or the easy spread strain or something like that. Because that's what we figured out is the biggest defining feature of it. It just seems to be able to spread person to person and or the hurricane. But something. We can talk about
A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah. We done learned with the name Operation Warp Speed, social distancing. Just the sound of social distancing now makes people sad. Even physical distancing sounds better. Just keep your space in between you and other people. But social distancing is like cut the world off. So anyway, we can learn a lot around what to call things because words do matter. So anyway, my point is with these variants, we're learning is the short answer. When you hear 95% effectiveness at preventing, spread, transmission, and then you hear numbers like 100% effective at preventing severe illness and death. 100% never makes sense to me. I would never want to put my name behind 100%. I would say greater than 99.9%, but I would never say 100% because that implies that nobody would die who gets the vaccine, and I just don't believe that. I don't believe that, and I don't believe that because they could die from some complication of the virus, but it is due to them contracting the virus. But anyway, so we're learning now because now that you've got these variant strains, and like I said, in the U.S., B117, the UK variant, being now the emerging dominant strain, then we're going to learn a lot more.
Well, hold on.
Because a lot more people will be getting sick with that particular version of the virus.
And we need to understand that the constant here is change. Let me bring up Jeremy, who called in from Evanston. He has a quick question for you or a statement about the vaccine.
Cool.
Jeremy?
Hi, good morning, Santita. I apologize for the background noise. I do know, I wanted to start out by saying I do know that the great Reverend, I heard you mention in the show that he had taken the vaccine. Or at least at the time that I was listening to the show, he was scheduled for the vaccine.
He did, and he's taken the second dose.
And he's already taken the second dose, so he's fully vaccinated at this point, as I understand. I am the third person in my family. I have a large family
I'm the third person in my family that has been fully vaccinated. And against my own best wishes, I have taken up the mantle to try and inspire the rest of my family to take the vaccine. And unfortunately, there's so much information. I'm not going to call it misinformation. There's so much information out there at this point in time that has pretty much made my family a little bit skeptical about taking the vaccine. And I've gotten my first shot already. So at this point, I'm kind of left out on a limb here because there's a lot of information out here that pretty much doesn't really resonate with the people who are afraid because of people like Bill Gates being at the head of the development of this vaccine, and also because of the simple fact that people are a little bit skeptical due to the fact that if you get the vaccine and you are fully vaccinated, why are you afraid of other people who are not vaccinated to be around you and to travel, alongside you in the instance that you have to be around these people? Why is it that we have to? Sorry, I apologize.
No, don't apologize for anything. We're going to answer this question. I want you to speak with Dr. Deborah Holden at the break. Because this is something, I was reading something from the Des Moines Register, an op-ed piece in which this gentleman said, look, so much bad messaging has come from those at the top at the beginning. That's part of the challenge. And so, we're going to talk about that. And then coming up in the next segment, we're going to talk about the Police Bill of Rights that was repealed in Maryland. And, wow, so much is going on. Another shooting in Minneapolis, just outside of Minneapolis. Wow. We're going to talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Jeremy? Is Jeremy still there?
Yeah, try now. See to hear.
Okay. Jeremy?
I'm still here.
No, sweetie.
Yes, ma'am. I'm still here for you.
Worries. I have a couple of minutes before we go to the next segment, but I wanted you to speak with Dr. Deborah Holden. Certainly, I want her to respond.
Jeremy just dropped or hung up.
Wow.
Okay. Well, Dr. Deb, why don't you respond to him? Because he's taken the vaccine and clearly he's thought about it, right? And he's concerned for his sprawling family. And
okay, Jeremy's back.
Okay, Jeremy's back. Okay, Jeremy. Oh, no, don't apologize.
Yes, ma'am. I do apologize.
No, don't.
Yeah.
There's Dr. Deborah Holden. You all have at it. Dr. Deb?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning.
Okay.
He says she's there. Does she mute?
The issue that he raises is a good one because a lot of people are in that very same situation. And I always tell people, hesitancy is not our biggest problem right now, but it is going to be a problem we have to ongoingly address. And the reason that I say it's not our biggest problem is because we've got so many people that are a yes. It's important that we make sure we get the shots in the arms of the people who are a yes. The problem is Jeremy is, the lone voice or one of only three voices in a very large family. What's going to begin to happen is as more people who say they want this vaccine are able to get the shot in their arm, the people in his family are going to be surrounded by more and more people who can be credible messengers. People like Jeremy, co-workers, people at their church, people in their book club, people in their neighborhood, other parents in the PTA. There's a phenomenon that's going to get created because very soon about 50% of the population will be vaccinated. It'll be very hard to not be, at some point, the scales are going to tip. And the people that aren't vaccinated are going to be the holdouts. So, Jeremy, I just encourage you to stay encouraged because it can be kind of tough. And I do believe the questions that people have are valid, and some of their concerns are valid. And what they don't really realize is if they talk to people who actually have had COVID and recovered, or they talk to loved ones of people who've had COVID and died, this will be a lot less of a battle for them. Because what I do know for a fact is when people get sick, they go in the hospital, They want every single drug, therapeutic known to man thrown at them to help them recover. They're getting antibodies, monoclonal antibodies. They're getting something that came from another human being's body who was sick with the virus injected into them. I mean, all that, humility is gone. It's just, that's all there is when you're fighting for your life. So stay encouraged, keep standing for people, and know that in the coming months, you will have more people standing with you for your family.
Well, and also I will say this. We've got to open up the conversations. I mean, I'm not vaccinated yet, and I'm waiting for them to work out a lot more kinks in the vaccine for me. But I support vaccinations because I've had many of them throughout my life.
60 seconds.
We've got to open up the conversation so that we can discuss them fully. We need to discuss vaccine injuries. We need to talk about some of the downsides of all this. That conversation has been shut down. And when you shut down any part of a conversation, this is what happens. It leaves the imagination to run riot. And that's been the mistake here. Because now I see a fair amount of bullying going on all sides. And that's not working for me. I'm a grown woman, and I should be able to determine what goes on with my body. And I want to talk about therapeutics. Nobody's talking about that because when you get COVID-19, I don't need a vaccine. I need therapeutics. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about all of it because we still don't know what this thing is. So I love
10 seconds.
Dr. Deb, Jeremy, I got to go because I got to move on to the next topic.
And we have Reverend Hatch for now.
Okay. And we have Reverend Yuri, right?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving.
Santita Jackson with the Sounds of Blackness on AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. Yeah, that's right. Sounds of Blackness. They've given me permission to use their music, so I want you all to vote on what you all want to hear. That song is Victorious, but we're going to be playing these songs throughout the week so that you can tell us which ones you like, and we can just play them all because Gary Hines told me that I could. So how about that? Thank you, Gary. I love you. I love you. I love you. It's Monday, April 12th, 2021. Got a lot to talk about today. And a lot of it has to do with the police in the United States. Many people are saying that the Chauvin trial is showing us that police in America are on trial. What do you think about that? Call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text there as well. I want to know what you think about the Police Bill of Rights. We first heard about this in 1991, about 2 weeks after the Rodney King beating. After the verdict became public. Then Senator Biden, who was really tough on crime, he pushed something called the Police Bill of Rights, which was to protect police. And it was a different time then, but he was known as someone who was always trying to battle crime. He was going to be tough on crime. And now things have changed. Something happened in Maryland in which the Police Bill of Rights was struck down. We've got Reverend Dr. Todd Yuri Esquire back with us. Of course, in addition to being vice president of Rainbow Push, he is also the senior pastor at Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore, Maryland. It's one of our iconic churches. And, of course, we're joined by another senior pastor of one of our iconic churches in the United States, New Mount Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church here in Chicago. I encourage you, if you are in Chicago or if you visit Chicago, you need to go to that church. It's a cathedral, and you see some of the finest stained glass renderings of Black people in the world, and the largest, too. It's absolutely stunning. You don't want to miss it. Let me start with you. The Police Bill of Rights. What happened in Maryland? And give us some context, Reverend Dr. Yuri.
Well, thank you, Santita. It's an important conversation. To give you some context, the notion of Police Bill of Rights actually did not start with now President Biden. Actually, Maryland had the oldest law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights in the country dating back to 1974. It was intended to provide procedural protections for police officers in the event that police officers were facing discipline for actions related to their jobs. And some of the revisions were things that anybody on the street would love to have, such as you could not be forced to participate in an examination or an interrogation if you were involved in an issue for up to 5 days to allow you time to secure counsel. If you were forced to participate in an interview or an interrogation before you had been given that opportunity, none of what came out of that interrogation could be used against you in either a disciplinary or a criminal proceeding. And so there were just absolutely irrational provisions that created actually a frame to allow some of what we've seen in policing begin to kind of take place. And in many instances, we saw states begin to apply their own interpretations of law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights, and then it kind of filtered up to the federal level. What happened in Maryland is that there was a working group before this General Assembly session, which started in January, where there was public testimony given. I offered public testimony. A lot of it spoke to repealing law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights, getting rid of no-knock warrants, except under certain conditions, making sure that you had civilian participation in disciplinary boards of police officers. All of that was part of the package. And so there was really kind of an omnibus bill, a huge bill to totally reform policing. There's still some items that we would go back and have to add that kind of strengthen some portions. But the repeal of the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights is probably the biggest piece because of what we've seen in this notion of what happens when police officers are tried. And I'll put it in a frame. Remember, what we're seeing in Minneapolis, Baltimore did not have a response to a police trial. We were trying to get police charged after Freddie Gray. That was the big deal. And until we had a groundswell of public support in the election of Marilyn Mosby as our state's attorney, it was looking as if Freddie Gray's death was going to pass with no light shined at all. We didn't get convictions. The issue was we couldn't even get charges. And so as we look at how this process has evolved, the fact that we now have civilian participation, you now have independent investigations of deaths in police custody by the state attorney general, not by the local departments. It mandates body cameras, departments above a certain size. I think the smallest departments are exempted, but there's some provisions to make sure that they have resources to secure them. There's just a number of things that had to be done, and just bear in mind, it did not happen because all branches of government, all sides of government agreed. The legislature had to override Governor Hogan's veto to get all of the provisions passed. They did one on Friday, they did the rest of the package on Saturday to override the governor's veto, and so now we will begin to see civilian participation in the disciplinary process. There'll be greater accountability, and the shield that has protected, in many instances, police officers, bad actors, might I add. We keep saying the vast majority of police officers are good officers. Well, if that's the case, then this should not make the good officers concerned. It should help us hold bad officers accountable.
What is the political context in which this is happening? I mean,
Well,
is this a response to Freddie Gray? Is this a response to... Oh, pardon my printer in the background. Is this a response to the Chauvin trial? Chauvin. I always thought it was Chauvin. I mean,
yeah.
Is this a response to that? What was Governor Hogan doing? What are the legislators doing?
Yeah. So the timing is answer D, all of the above. We have been trying to repeal LEOBR in Maryland for several General Assembly sessions, probably going back to even before I started law school in 2015, which was right after Freddie Gray's death. So this has been many years in the making. I think what has made this the moment is that we've had a convergence of simultaneous issues that have built upon what stood off as one-offs, right? Remember, Freddie Gray happened after Mike Brown and Ferguson. There were several months between there. But then you started to see more of the public disclosure of almost simultaneous incidents across the country that was just raising pressure on state legislatures. And I got to say that the advocates in Maryland, my colleagues and leaders of the Beautiful Struggle and Joint Opportunities Task Force, Senator Jill Carter, who was in the House of Delegates when we started some of this work. She's now in the upper chamber. She headed the Office of Civil Rights in Baltimore City for a time. I've worked with her. The first Black woman Speaker of the House of Delegates in Maryland, Speaker Adrian Jones, Senate President Bill Ferguson. They have been very intentional about making sure that we did not continue to hold the line on keeping unnecessary protections in a system that was clearly flawed. And so I think it was a combination of we had done several years of groundwork, but I think this was the moment where Maryland decided they wanted to be ahead of the curve in setting the context of how we get into progressive policing and policing accountability rather than waiting for it to come from somewhere else.
Well, why don't you respond to that? Because, we struggle with the police in Baltimore, in New York, in Chicago, Pastor Hatch, on the south side, on the west side, on the north side, on all sides of town. This is an issue. What about police, the police Bill of Rights, and the context in which they happen? Do you think it's public pressure that's pushing this? Do you see any of it coming to Chicago?
Absolutely. Thank you, Santita. And we are just very fortunate to have the Reverend Attorney Yuri in Maryland in this season because of what we've seen this weekend. It really demonstrates how this issue has now become focused on what is going on in the state legislatures across the country. We've been focused often on national politics, on national tickets, but we have to take note that this happened. Adrian Jones, Delegate Adrian Jones, Speaker of the House, her leadership there in Maryland. And so it really demonstrates how we're going to have to carry these kind of fights through the state legislatures. I think Maryland.
Hold on. Let me ask you this: because do you think we pay attention enough to our state legislators, Pastor Hatch? Because we're always looking at Washington, right? It's like it's Annapolis, it's Springfield, it's Albany, it's Sacramento.
Absolutely, not there. It's Springfield, yes. And we just out of the emerging out of the long tenure of Mike Madigan here in Illinois, the longest serving Speaker of the House in American history, was just resigned under a cloud of federal investigation. And emerging out of that cloud, the first African American Speaker of the House, Chris Welch, from out here in the western suburbs. It is actually where the game is at Springfield when it comes to police reform. I was going to say Maryland is interesting historically, as home where Frederick Douglass originates. But the way that police evolved in America, first as slave catchers, which was almost an evolution out of overseers. And the reason so many Irish who came from the bottom of Europe were given the assignment of monitoring and socially controlling black bodies out of slavery, and then in Reconstruction and post-Reconstruction. And so the police themselves evolved with this racial narrative, this racist narrative of controlling black people, controlling black bodies, black people not having constitutional rights, black people not having rights that any white man is bound to respect, sanctioned by a Supreme Court decision, that this is the evolution of policing in America. I'm actually astounded that we have come this far because understanding the history of policing is something that many of us have known about, obviously, for years. But to have it a part of the public dialogue is an incredible development in this country, to talk about the history of policing, the police being used as racist origins in America. And of course, now that we have these videotapes and the cell phones and citizens armed with these instruments of being able to video record, I think that it has changed the dynamic significantly. And of course, Maryland has now become an epicenter of showing us what this kind of reform looks like and what reforming, not just reform, but reforming the police department.
Let me go to Ron from Naperville. Ron, what's on your mind today?
Hi, how are you?
It's great.
Hi, Santita. You know, I have police and military in my background, so I talk to my dad a lot about, various shootings, and he's always categorically, that's murder, except it's hard to charge an officer with murder. And we talked about it. We need to actually come up with laws that actually can stick to a law enforcement officer. Murder one, there is no way, there's no way it can ever stick. It's just impossible for a jury to believe an officer woke up in the morning and was going to start murdering people, unless they were a serial killer. And so I'm thinking that's one big problem. And then two, the notion of presumed innocence is great, but when you're trained to be this war-empowered citizen with the ability to inflict lethal force on another citizen authorized, you have to be held to a much higher standard. In the military, we have the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which applies to us in addition to the civilian laws. So you can go to jail twice in the military for being bad. I think in the police, instead of protecting, they have to say, look, you have been trained to a much higher standard. Someone swings at you, you duck, you put them in handcuffs, you don't asphyxiate them. That's not what you do. You're there to protect. And I'm sorry, but we got to get back to the real reason police are supposed to be today, and that is to protect the public, not murder the public.
You're right, but Ron, I think that what Pastors Yeary and Hatch are speaking to is a culture. I mean, beyond what you're supposed to do.
Absolutely.
I hear you, it's written, but what's encoded in the culture is something quite different. Pastor Yeary, and then you, Pastor Hatch.
Well, but here's what, and I appreciate the caller's point. There are a couple of things. There's what's encoded in law and what has been interpreted by the courts. So one of the challenges we also face, and the reason why we've got to get state laws changed, is, let's be clear, 97% of criminal charges are under state law, not federal law. The vast majority of folks who ever get caught up in the system are usually going to be charged with a state law infraction. So now we got to look at the state laws. To the earlier question that you raised and Pastor Hatch spoke to, we got to pay more attention to the down ballot. We talked about it a lot last fall. But the other thing is the Supreme Court over the years has done some really squishy stuff with giving police officers a whole lot of latitude. Qualified immunity is not a legislated principle. It's a legal interpretation that the Supreme Court read into a case. The notion, let me give you one that came up. There's a case called North Carolina v. Hine. Traffic stop for what was believed to be a traffic infraction. We're talking about what happened in Minneapolis last night. One tail light out. They figured that's an infraction. Come to find out, North Carolina law did not make it an infraction for one tail light to be out. You just needed at least one to be operating. They then do a search. The search then yields contraband. They try to suppress the evidence because it was an illegal stop. What the Supreme Court said is that if the police listen to this, police officers, if they reasonably believe that the law that doesn't exist is really a law, you can still then hold on to what comes by way of that stop and search as long as that belief was reasonable under the circumstances. Well, basically that just says, by way of Supreme Court interpretation, anything goes until we say it doesn't go. And so we've got a lot of work to do, not just in terms of state law, but in terms of who's sitting in courtrooms and on court benches, interpreting the application and how to protect the rights of people, because basically, even though we've got big repeal in Maryland, you still have a big problem coming out of the Supreme Court in Washington as it relates to policing. And so this battle's just getting started. It's nowhere near over.
So the Supreme Court can override what's happened in Maryland legislatively.
If there is a violation on a federal constitutional right, they can. Otherwise, it's state law, right? It would be hard. So there's no. I think they carefully crafted. It does not preclude a police officer from invoking their Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. It just says procedurally there's some things that are in place that allows the community to be engaged. Make sure that the equipment that is used has to be widespread, that the process has to be fair. Those are things that I think pass Supreme Court scrutiny. It would be hard-pressed to get a case up to them because there's no constitutional entitlement. This is all a creature, to Pastor Hatch's point, is that, remember, it was property interest that led to slave catching. You didn't just go after captive bodies. It was because they were viewed as property. They weren't viewed as bodies. So this notion that we see this attitude that's deeply embedded should not be a shock if we know our history. And the history has evolved. We're in this place. It's now time for us to write new chapters, and we're going to have to do it state by state.
And Pastor Hatch, we're not pushing against the police. The fact is, I respect anyone who runs toward trouble while I'm trying to run away from it. I think we're trying to attack the corruption in any agency, the police, in any construct, right?
We're not pushing against law enforcement, but I mean, I really appreciate the caller and challenge the caller that we cannot have this conversation without the narrative of race being the subtext of what happens in America. For example, here in Chicago, 52% of the police personnel live in only 5 of the 50 wards. Over half of the police department lives in 10% of the community areas of the wards in Chicago. I mean, which means that these are neighborhoods of police officers where the test is passed down, where you have cronyism, nepotism, these jobs are owned by certain communities, and yes, certain ethnic groups. Also, parallel are the judgeships in Cook County, which and often they control these state's attorney's offices that determines with discretion who gets prosecuted. And so you have this system of corruption parallel with racism, and we always get the bad end of a bad deal in the shake. And so I believe that we're going to need at some point, and of course, all the legal nuances, these are good fights, but we're going to need a total reformation of police personnel. I mean, these jobs simply cannot be the purview of certain white ethnic groups in a multiracial democracy. For example, here in Chicago, and can't get away with the underlay of politics. Chicago is a blue city in a blue state, and its police department is Republican, and has in fact part of these neighborhoods that they lived in have supported a Nazi candidate of late. I mean, so how can you have a police department so disconnected from the values and the pluralistic culture of a community that they are supposed to police? I mean, so we've got to be some real broader conversation, not just about the legal nuances, which are important, good fights, but the police themselves should constitute literally a reflection of the people who are being policed.
Well, because remember, Democrats in Chicago are also kind of problematic. They differ from Democrats around the country, the machine. I mean, real muscular power politics is played here. So it's like you've got the Republicans who statewide tend to be pretty mild, and the Democrats in Chicago are muscular. And if progressives have to run against the Democratic machine in this town. And so, and I think that the city, our police officers reflect that. I mean, it's real muscular wherever you go. Let me bring up Renee really quickly. Renee, I'm inside of 2 minutes before I have to go. Renee, what's on your mind?
Thanks. Good morning, and thanks for taking my call. I was calling in response to the previous caller who said that it's hard to convict police because, people look at them as the good guys. Well, perception is everything. And from where I'm standing in my neighborhood, when a policeman shoots somebody, I don't think that he's a good guy because I've seen too many people get shot in their back. Not personally saw them, but I know people who've been shot. I'm down the street from where Howard Morgan was shot 28 times. My daughter's godson was shot in the head, and Stephen Rosenthal, and they said it was suicide. So it's perception, everything. When you see that the police do a lot of evil things to people, you don't look at them as the good guys. But we don't happen to be the people getting on juries to give, to bring a different perception to cases. If you have people who sympathize with police are going to get off if they ever get charged with anything. So I think those are problems. And in Chicago, remember, we have nonpartisan elections, so they don't really have to state who they are. And when you have people like Rahm Emanuel, who brought in all these blue dog Democrats when he was in Congress, and people who sympathize more with Republicans than what are supposed to be
just right-wing politics.
Ideology.
Mm-hmm. It's right-wing politics. I have to say that because historically we could talk to a Governor Ogilvy, a Governor Thompson. It was the Democrats who were giving us a fit in Chicago and in Illinois politics. I mean, it's a transpartisan issue. It's about power and the use and abuse of it. So, you know what? I love you, Renee, and I'm so glad that you called in. Stay right here. We're going to talk a little bit out on Facebook Live during the break. But coming up, we're going to be talking about the latest on the Derek Chauvin trial and the shooting last night in Minneapolis. And everyone's talking about this video of this Black Army officer who was held at gunpoint. And he said he was afraid to get out of his car, and the police officer said, "You should be." Come on now. The Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Renee, why don't you speak to Pastors Hatch and Yuri before, well, I mean, I don't know if they want to let me know.
I'm running for work. I'm running late.
Oh, bless your heart. Well, let me have them respond.
But can I say one thing, Santita?
Of course.
Okay. I just want to say, when you have a police force that comes primarily from Bridgeport and from Mount Greenwood, some of the most racist places in the city, your police force is going to be racist. And it's by design.
Absolutely, and it's a transpartisan thing. So, Pastor Hatch and Pastor Yuri, your response to her quickly before we go?
Yeah, with a call on the trans, with the local dynamics that, these are jobs that people in certain neighborhoods think belong to them, include the fire department. I had to preach the eulogies of Betty Jones and Quintona Greer, a double police homicide, and back in 2016. They was killed in 2015. I had to do the eulogies the first week of that year, 2016. And the police officer, Robert Rialmo, he stated publicly as he fought to keep his job that, he has a right to keep his job, but he just might be a fireman after all. That's the mentality of the people that live in these communities. And I just simply think that the department is going to have to be disbanded from top to bottom, and we're going to have to start over so that the department at some point reflects the communities that they are called to police. But this is just an untenable situation where you have the kind of cronyism. For example, white police officers are known to, as an unspoken rule, many of them, as they arrest black people en masse, young black kids, They know that these kids now no longer can compete with their kids for these jobs because they have police records. I mean, it is diabolical by the time you look at what happens on the ground.
Pastor Yuri?
So, I mean, Pastor Hatch's point is clear. This is why we've got to fight this fight on all fronts. In Maryland, it was determined unconstitutional to put a residency requirement in place for police officers. That came from the State Court of Appeals. And so every state is its own battlefield. That's why we've got to have folks engaged in the fight on the ground where these fights are happening. The other thing I will say to Pastor Hatch's point is, remember, Freddie Gray died because Freddie Gray ran. No one could ever say what Freddie Gray did on that Sunday morning other than he was tired of being roughed up by the police. He saw the police on a Sunday morning, didn't feel like being bothered, took off running. When they caught him, they found nothing on him, drugs, drug paraphernalia, or money. And from his injuries of giving him allegedly a rough ride, he ended up with spinal injuries and died a week later. And so let's just be real clear about what is at stake and what's been going on. This, we can say, if we close our eyes and say, all right, we describe what happened in the suburb of Minneapolis last night, or in Minneapolis on the streets of Chicago, or in Baltimore, or in Atlanta, or in Louisville. At the end of the day, and until we go back and deal with the fact that this is America and deal with American history in its totality, not in its mythic formation, we're going to continue to be dealing with these issues. Let's deal with it, and let's deal with it forthrightly. And let's stop pretending that somehow or other we're living a fairy tale. We are living an American nightmare.
I'm going to release you, fine pastors. I'm already saying right now, I'm going to have you back on before the week is out. We've got a lot to talk about, Pastor Hatch. Pastor Yuri, sending you much love. Thank you for the good news this morning.
Appreciate it.
Reverend Dr. Yuri, Esquire, and Reverend Dr. Hatch, Professor, Preacher, Theologian. Y'all
good to hear you, Reverend Yuri.
I can't wait to have you all back. Got a lot to talk about.
Good to hear you, Hatch.
Preacher talk.
Great.
Yuri, Hatch.
Great.
So, well, sending you all much love. Let me let them go so we can go on and move on to this next segment. Okay, thank you so much.
All
right, everybody. Thank you so much. Do we have Dwight McKee
and Attorney Connolly? I'll let you. I'm still trying to get CK. I'll let you know I get her.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Okay, Aaron.
Good morning, Santita. Good morning, everyone.
Sweetie, I wanted to talk about Adam Toledo today, but what I'd like to do, can you help me to pull together? I want to get some Latinx leaders to talk about that tomorrow.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay?
Absolutely.
Let me move that over.
I will follow up after the show. Yeah.
It's a very explosive situation. I mean, this is a child. I'm sorry, a 13-year-old less baby.
Child. Yeah.
It's a child. I miss Dr. Carl Bell, Dwight, at times like these. He would argue passionately for our children. He said their brains are not even fully developed. You're not mature until you're 25. He says you got to write off what these kids do and say, because you're not. It hasn't all come together. Literally, the brain is not. Both sides have not all come together until you're 25. Miss him in a time like this. Boy, we miss him. But he did leave a tremendous body of work.
60 seconds.
So, okay, we'll get right to it. Okay, you keep on trying, Devin. Thank you so much.
We got Attorney CK now.
Okay, perfect.
Hello?
Okay. Hey, stand by, CK. We're coming up.
Okay, hi, how are you?
Great hearing your voice.
Yes, likewise. Good to be here Monday morning.
10 seconds.
Praise the Lord. Oof. Some people are not here today. How about that? Dante is not here. up in Minneapolis.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
No matter what, we are victorious. I'm Santita Jackson. Santita Jackson, the Santita Jackson Show. Monday, April 12th, 2021. How do you like that from Sounds of Blackness? I love it. Let me know what you're thinking about the music from them today. They've given us permission on the Santita Jackson Show to use their songs, and I am so glad about it. I love you, Gary Hines, and the Sounds of Blackness. So let us know what you're thinking, everybody. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. That is the number that you can call or text. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text. We want to talk with you today about all that's happening in the Derek Chauvin case, what's happening in Minneapolis, St. Paul, what's happened in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I mean, here we are looking at the wrapping up of the prosecution, the beginning of the defense of Derek Chauvin. And then now you have a young man, 20 years of age, killed on a traffic violation. Dante Wright. Let's get to some of these headlines as we talk about what's happening today in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and all around the country, everybody. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about Adam Toledo, the 13-year-old boy who was killed here by the police. Want to talk about that tomorrow, in addition to the Derek Chauvin case. Hey, everybody, the Santita Jackson Show, April 12th, 2021. Guess what? Chicago, we're going to have a high of 62 degrees, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 47 degrees, showers. Oh, wow. What happened in baseball yesterday? Well, the Pirates were triumphant over the Cubs 7-1. Tonight, the Cubs play the Brewers. Oh, the Mariners. Well, they bested the Twins 8-6. But tonight, the Twins can make it up by they'll be playing against Cincinnati. And then, of course, the White Sox. Well, yes, we all just took hits yesterday. The White Sox fell to the Royals 4-3. But tonight, they can make it all up by playing Cleveland. Everybody, what happened in Minneapolis yesterday? Police in the Minneapolis area shot and killed 20-year-old Dante Wright, who is black. According to the Brooklyn Center Police, which is just north of Minneapolis, the incident occurred shortly before 2 p.m. yesterday when an officer pulled over his vehicle due to an alleged traffic violation. Police stated that the driver re-entered the vehicle as officers attempted to take him into custody because of an outstanding warrant. So, what do you think about this? Dante Wright's mother, Katie Wright, told reporters on Sunday that she had been on the phone with her son as the encounter with the police occurred. According to her account, reported by local TV news in Minneapolis, St. Paul, her son had called her as he was being pulled over to get car insurance for the vehicle, which she had recently given him. She said she heard officers instruct her son to get out of the car and then scuffling shortly before the phone hung up. A minute later, I called and his girlfriend answered, who was the passenger in the car, and said he'd been shot, and she put it on the driver's side, and my son was laying there lifeless. Got to talk about that, everybody. And what about this black Army officer? Um, Officer Nazario. Now, he's a black Latino, but he is a black man, everybody. And he was pulled over December 5th in Virginia. Windsor, Virginia. He was wearing his Army fatigues. And so he was confused as to why police were yelling for him to exit the car last December and for not having a permanent rear license plate. And he had a temporary license plate in his tinted windows in the back window, everybody. Well, he pulled over. He drove for another minute because he wanted to get to a well-lit area. And so when the police told him that he told the police he was honestly afraid to get out of the car and his hands were up and they were outside of the car. The officer replied, yeah, you should be. Well, in the meantime, as Governor Northam has called for an investigation of what happened to this officer, at least one of the police officers involved in that has been fired. What do you think about all of this? 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Well, now the prosecution's about to rest in a day or so. In the Derek Chauvin trial, what's going to happen? Is policing in America on trial? Many of Derek Chauvin's former bosses say yeah. And now we're hearing that there's a controversial defense strategy, excited delirium. We heard Eric Nelson, Derek Chauvin's attorney, he continues to drop that. What is that going to mean? It's a controversial and disputed expression, often used in fatal cases of police violence. In other words, it's the way out, everybody. While certain medical bodies and experts recognize the term, according to this Guardian report, many others do not, and there's no universally accepted definition of what it constitutes. But remember, only one person on that jury needs to feel that it was excited delirium that got this man restrained and had him die. Wow, everybody. So, well, congratulations to Mr. Matsuyama. That's right. He held his nerve, according to this Guardian headline, to become the Masters champion. He is the first Asian born player to win the green jacket. He's the first Japanese player to win a major and to win the green jacket. Blessings and love to him. Let's get right to it, everybody. Got a lot going on today. Got a lot going on. We thought that, okay, we were just going to be looking at George Floyd and Derek Chauvin in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And we've had Pastor Jerry McAfee, one of the most prominent ministers in the country, who's based in Minneapolis. We've had Spike Moss. We're going to have him back on in the next day or so. They've been trying to tell us, look, Minneapolis is a really tough place for Black people, for indigenous people to be. Indeed, according to studies, this is the third or fourth worst place in America for Black people to live. And we don't even discuss the problems, the challenges facing the indigenous community. Well, while we're looking at George Floyd, we're now seeing the case of Daunte Wright. So let's start with this Floyd case. Okay, let's start with Attorney C.K. Hoffler. First of all, give me your elevator pitch. When I was hearing that the prosecution is near the close of their case, I said, wait a minute, there's got to be more. We're not going to talk about what happened in the club, where former officer Chauvin and George Floyd used to work. There's got to be more to this. Are we near the end of the presentation of the prosecution's case?
We are near the end of the presentation. And there is that information. It is, and again, what I have to assume, having been done trial work, and you make a lot of judgment calls, and part of the judgment calls that you make in determining which witnesses you put on is what evidence will you get from them. And is the evidence that you will get from them, if there's some other stuff that's not so good, is it worth it to put them on the stand? And so if there is not any evidence relative to any relationship between Derek Chauvin and George Floyd, I've got to assume that either one, there was no witness that could come forward and speak to that, or two, if there was a witness, that witness would not be beneficial to the prosecution's case. That's my assumption. So I don't think we're going to hear anything about a relationship, but certainly in closing, the prosecution could argue that if the prosecution felt that that was necessary. So I think in terms of meeting the elements, I believe that they have met the elements. There are three possibilities for the conviction. Actually, there are a lot of different things that could happen. They're seeking, of course, to have the most rigid conviction of the highest crimes, not the lesser crimes. But I think that there's enough evidence there for a conviction. It just depends on how this jury is processing the information. And when you're in a courtroom, a lot of times, not all the time, a lot of times as a trial attorney, you do have a sense of like the juror's reaction to certain evidence. Because when you're trying a case, you usually try it as a team, particularly a big case like this. There are people who are doing nothing other than watching the juror's reaction. Because with something like this, it's hard to conceal emotion. It's hard to conceal your feelings when some of the evidence is so poignant. And hearing the chief of police speak, it's hard to not have a reaction. And hearing the medical examiner speak, and hearing a pulmonologist speak, it's hard to conceal your reaction to that evidence. And so I think from a technical standpoint, they probably have met the elements, but will that result in a conviction that would put Derek Chauvin, away for years and years and years? That's a different story. And of course, the sentencing phase is different. The judge would weigh in on that. but I think that they have probably met the elements. I would have liked to have seen more evidence relative to any relationship because I thought that the killing was so personal. You know, that 9 minutes and 29 seconds, the way that and it didn't matter to me whether it was the neck or the back or the back or the neck. When all of the expert people thus far who've testified about this, the police officers said that once George Floyd stopped resisting, everybody, well, I don't know, but I imagine that most people resist arrest. Once he stopped resisting, and certainly once he started saying, "I can't breathe," Derek Chauvin had a duty to stop with that procedure, and he didn't. Actually, he went in more to make sure that he did, and that to me felt personal. So I would, if there was some type of connection that someone could speak to, for me, that would cement the deal. But again, I'm not there, and maybe they don't need that. I'm not an expert under Minnesota law, and so maybe they don't need that to be able to make the case. I just don't know. But I would like to have seen more of that connection. That's just me and looking at it because, yeah.
No. I mean, no, it's a lot. Attorney Aaron Connolly. What do you see?
Good morning, Santita. Good morning, and thank you to Attorney C.K. Hoffler for the analysis there. I think all of that is accurate as far as the legalities of the case, though, that those elements were met. And to add anything superfluous regarding their relationships may have clouded an already intense emotional case. And as we see the headlines today coming out of Minneapolis, St. Paul, is another reminder of the systematic issues that we have not only in that state but across the country. And so it'll be interesting to see at such a crucial point in this trial how this jury, will sequestered or not, will potentially be impacted by additional headlines, right? We see another awful scenario where a mother is talking about the death of her child while police who are supposed to protect this child within 2 minutes, you said, right, from them pulling him over, was shot without a probable reasonable cause. Nobody should be shot and murdered for a traffic violation in this country. That's just, we have a standard of care that one of your other callers was discussing, Santita, that I thought was really interesting. We hold police as a baseline, and they hold themselves, their culture, their superiors. They hold themselves to a standard where they can shoot and ask questions later, and that is supported, condoned by the municipalities, by the budgets that pay them, by, in many cases, the federal government, and they are empowered to have this culture. And we see places like Maryland chipping away at some of these structural assumptions that are now embedded in many cultures of many police forces, as we see is particularly rampant in Chicago, where we're talking about another 13-year-old little boy who, through a misunderstanding, was shot because, again, there's these shootings first, asking questions later, and it's been an emotional few days. I know a lot of people are processing every detail of the trial in Minneapolis, and I hope and pray that we see some justice done for the Floyd family, and we see on a greater level justice served to show police around this country that you cannot murder someone with your badge. And that's what happened here. So I don't have a lot to add beyond what the brilliant attorney C.K. Hoffler added, but I think her analysis, as always, is on point, and that, these prosecutors are looking at what they need for a conviction and trying to just keep the focus on those elements, and the testimony that they've gotten out of these witnesses is raw, it's compelling, it's very emotional, and so I hope that we can see some justice for this family. I think they've done a good job to meet those elements of this case.
Wow. You just said murder with a badge, Dwight. Murder with a badge. Wow. Are you surprised at what do you make of of the case so far presented by the prosecution? How does it settle upon you?
Casey, I think they've done a great job of presenting the evidence, and I think that with the videotape, it's given them a real foundation to argue from. It has now to do with how the evidence is interpreted by the witnesses who bring their own prejudices and their own presuppositions to the experience. And so it really does not matter as much as what the evidence is if the crowd is already predisposed to dismiss it and to give the police the benefit of the doubt. But you know that, and I thought Pastor Hatch was really profound today, is that who you hire is the behavior you get. And in our country, we are predisposed to hire these guys with this Beretta Kojak mentality, who join the police department or come out of the military because they have a real affinity for, you know, a military lifestyle and guns, and many of them had this bully mentality. And that's a lot of the crowd that join the police department. We don't have a lot of academics on the police department. We don't have a lot of pacifists on the police department. It attracts a certain kind of mindset. And so you see that these police, they stop you with a certain disdain and contempt. They seek to create confrontation. It starts so hostile, it can't help but degenerate into something violent. And all I do is I thank God that this young man had on his uniform yesterday, because I think it saved his life. Had he not had a uniform, had he had on a jogging suit, I think he'd have been dead by now.
Wait, Dwight. He said, honestly, I'm afraid to get out of the car. And the officer shouted back, yeah, you should be. Wait a minute. And it wasn't chasing a murderer. He was pulling him over about his license plate. What?
And the only thing that mitigated that was that he had a uniform on that was very visible.
But they were pointing the guns, Dwight. I mean,
had he had on a jogging suit, Santita, they would justify them shooting him, because the excuse would have been I thought he was reaching for a gun rather than for his phone. It was the fact he had on a uniform that gave them any constraint to just assault this kid. They come to us with such a disdain and such a hostility that it is a recipe for disaster.
And CK, you can see that whether you are struggling to pull your life together as George Floyd, or someone who's an established member of our military, decorated. It's Dante, bless his heart. I mean, all these young men, two of them pulled over for minor traffic violations. Dante's dead. While he's talking to his mom, and they all had the presence of mind to turn on, except for George Floyd. Others around them turned on their cameras, their phones, and said, I've got to watch this. What does it say? That when we see citizens interacting with the police, and that is whatever our colors. I mean, because these were white people who were taking these videos too with George Floyd. It doesn't matter. It's like there's something happening in America where everybody's saying, hold up, wait a minute.
Now, Santita, I agree. But this is the state of affairs. I can tell you about 20 years ago, I got a call from a judge who I knew in Virginia, who had been traveling in with her significant other in LA, and they were driving a nice vehicle. They'd rented a nice vehicle, and they were pulled over, and they were handcuffed, placed on the ground, and held for 2 hours because of mistaken identity, allegedly mistaken identity. They thought that her significant other who was a passenger, was somebody who had just robbed something. And they were driving speed limit. They were not. There was no traffic violation. There was no reason for them to have pulled them over, other than mistaken identity. So that was literally a case of driving while black as a passenger, not driving while black driving, but driving while black as a passenger. And that caused them to be pulled over. And it took, they didn't believe she was a judge. And he was a, I don't know, someone who had, had been engaged with law enforcement as well. They didn't believe any of that. They thought that, they were lying. And it took 2 hours. And then they just said, yeah, okay, we're sorry, whatever. We thought, you were somebody else. And that was the end of that for them at that moment. It wasn't the end of that for the judge and her significant other. And so that was 20-something years ago. This happens literally every day. They just don't get reported. And by the way, there are people who are pulled over who get killed every day that don't, and it doesn't get reported. It doesn't meet the headlines. Cases worse than George Floyd. It never, ever reaches the headlines because in certain communities, it's so common that people are like, oh, yeah, it's so sad. And just think of over the weekend in Chicago, you could have 13 or 14 shootings by police, right? And they never make headline news. Now, when you have like a 13-year-old or 14, like this weekend, and they're all tragic, they're all terrible, they're all awful, and unless somebody is pulling a gun on the police or threatening deadly harm that would warrant that kind of response, none of those people should be killed. That's the thing. They have alternatives. They can de-escalate. They're trained to do so, but they don't do it. There's just a presumption.
But you know what, CK?
And
as we go to this break, just stay right there. Stay right there. We got a lot to talk about. Got a lot to unpack. A lot of shootings. Adam Toledo, 13 years of age. Why was he shot by the police? Dante Wright, 20 years of age. Why was he shot by the police? Why was Officer, what is it? I'm just losing track of the names here. It's just happening all over the place. He was almost shot by the police. Nazario. They say he's a black Latino. Hey, he's a black man. That's what almost got him killed. December 5th, 2020. Now, let's just put it where it is. Come on now. Gotta talk about this as I listen to my theme music from the Sounds of Blackness. Love you, Gary Hines. Gonna have you on tomorrow to talk about it. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. We will be victorious. Whew, you guys. I can't even keep track of all these names here. It's just like, what?
But you know what, Santita? It's not. People are thinking, oh, we're seeing it more now. No, you're not seeing it more now. They're just getting reported.
You're right. I mean, that's why they pulled out these phones. This girl, Darnella Frazier, sent her baby cousin into that store because she did not want her to see what she thought what she knew she was going to see. She just pulled out that phone so she could be traumatized at 17. A 17-year-old is a child. Okay?
Yeah.
That's a child. At 18, she's still a child. If people wanted to interview me or talk to me at 18, 19, 20, 21, my mother said, no. You must go through her father and her mother. Period. Well, she's an adult. Yep. My mother said, no. She's got a mama. She's got a daddy. And you must speak with us before you speak with... wait a minute. I mean, they act like these folks are just weeds out here. But even weeds come out of the ground. They have life. Yep. What is this? This Dante Wright was talking to his mother, CK. Aaron, you all are mothers. Dwight, you've got a child. Can you imagine? That mama is talking to her son. He's saying, I need to find the insurance because the police are about to pull me over. And she's telling him. She hears a scuffle and she's like, oh my goodness. You can imagine. I don't have any children. But you all are mothers. CK and Aaron, you're mothers. You can only imagine how this woman said, what is going on? And then the girl, oh.
But Santita, that almost was me. When both of my sons were pulled over for, I guess, driving my vehicle. on their way to school in the Atlanta metropolitan area. They text me to let me know.
Oh, wow.
This is how fast, how kids are really fast on the text. They text me to let me know, Mommy, you pulled over by the police. I just, as I said, 3 of the worst minutes that I could ever recall in my life. Just praying that it wouldn't end like just what happened this weekend. What's happening? That's a mother's fear. But I was there. I don't have to imagine it. I was there. The only thing I have to imagine was if it had ended differently. And it just was just in that moment. I just got on my knees and prayed. I mean, this is senseless. This is crazy that we have to actually do this. Sit and pray when your kids get pulled over for no reason. There was no speeding or anything like that. That's not what it was. It was just getting pulled over. I guess they thought maybe my kid stole the vehicle.
A traffic violation? What is that? A traffic violation?
Or in the case of my kid, maybe they thought that they stole my vehicle.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, but even then, okay, it's a high. Look, it's just
60 seconds.
Think about it. They don't do drug busts on college campuses. CK, Aaron,
Right.
Okay, you do that on the areas that border the campuses because believe it or not, Yale is in the middle of the black community. Okay, it's in a struggling community. New Haven is not a rich city.
Columbia.
You come on, Columbia is in Harlem. Yeah.
Mm.
So they're not doing any drug busts. Please. Oh my gosh. Even though the white kids are coming to the black neighborhoods to buy the drugs.
Yep.
Oh, come on. Get out of here. I mean, just, and hundreds of people went out into the streets yesterday in Minneapolis. I'm going to go to Chris. Is Chris from Wheaton still there?
Chris has dropped 10 seconds.
Okay. Wow. Chris, if you can call back, because everybody calls at 773-763-WCPT. 773.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Oh, yeah. Santita Jackson Show. Santita Jackson Show, Monday, April 12th, 2021. We're going to be victorious. Thank you, Sounds of Blackness. We're going to be. This is a really tough moment, everybody. We are looking at the Chauvin trial. At least the prosecution is beginning to draw to a close. What are we going to conclude from that? What will the defense say? What will they say? And now protests shot out in Minneapolis yesterday because of the killing over a traffic violation of this 20-year-old young man, Dante Wright, not fully of majority age, 20 years of age. He had a traffic violation. Girlfriend in the car. The police shoot him. Really? What is that? Then we see the Black Army officer from December 5th, 2020. And now he is suing. He has filed a federal lawsuit because he was pulled over, traffic violation. He did not have license plates because he had new license plates and he had the temporary sticker in his windows. The windows were tinted. They pulled him over and he drove another minute and some change because he said, you know what, let me get to a well-lit area. He told it's something inside of his survival instincts made him turn on his camera so that he could record the entire interaction with the police. And thank goodness he did because they came out with guns ablazing. What is that? And he said, honestly, I'm afraid to get out the car. Just hold on, hands up, both of them. Don't shoot. They said, yeah. One of them said, yeah, you should be. What? Over a traffic violation? Really? All this wasted human capital, all these people dying, really? They're not dying, they're being killed. Snuffed out. Frightened to death. What is that about? Call me 773-763-WCPT because I don't know about you, we're going to be using the song Sick and Tired. We want that loaded into the system from Sounds of Blackness because I am sick and tired of this. What about you? What is this? Too many mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and cousins and friends are crying because their friends and their loved ones are being killed, just being killed by the police, and there is no recourse for the people. None. What is that? Oh, Dwight McKee, what is this? What are we looking at?
Life in America. They, and when you look at this situation with police, there'll be no consequences. If they fire the boy the policeman that did it, chances are he'll get another job as a policeman right up the road in 6 more months, doing the exact same thing. He was never charged with a crime. It seemed to me that that should have been a felonious assault. If you just out to clear for no reason come and spray somebody with a pepper spray, that should have been a criminal charge. He should be in jail. Firing him is not enough. He'll probably get his pension fund, some form of his pension fund. And so there are no consequences. And there are no consequences for the policeman that made it happen. I think that there should be a law that says that police, the responsibility of a policeman has to be the protection of the citizen. And that if he sees one policeman, even if it's his partner, out of control, then he has the responsibility to check and balance and arrest that policeman. That he should then say, wait, this is illegal what you are doing. You, my partner, are under arrest. Or at least you need to stand down until the supervisor get here and we could sort this thing out. But in many ways, the policemen who are not directly involved get drawn in because they're in with some maniac policeman, but don't know how to respond to him and don't know how to stop the problem. He should have been arrested. He should be in jail now, as most of these policemen who walk away indemnified.
Aaron, can you imagine what Dante Wright's mother went through? She was on the phone.
No.
With
no. I can't imagine it. I can't imagine being in the scenario that CK just described with her boys praying when you're expecting an officer who has took an oath to serve and protect you and your community, and to have a fear that the opposite will happen. And I think, to Dwight's point, we need to look at, clearly something is broken within the culture of law enforcement in the United States. We can all agree that something is not working. If this many people are murdered, assaulted, in custody, when they pose no threat, when it's a routine situation, right? A traffic incident, what should be, a check-in for a wellness check. For example, many people suffering mental health issues encounter violent scenarios with police when they should be encountering a conversation and maybe a reference, potentially some medication. So we need to look at the default that the police are given in this country, and they should be held to a higher standard of care. We look at other groups like physicians, attorneys, even common carriers, whether like airlines, have a higher standard of care for people in their care and custody. The police need a similar accountability mechanism to at least incentivize officers who are wielding deadly weapons, guns in many cases, sometimes other things like military-grade vehicles in our communities. We need to be able to trust that their default is not to assault or use violence when it is not called for, okay? There are situations where the police are in dangerous situations and they do need to have some discretion. That discretion has been abused, and there's evidence that exists in many of these major metropolitan areas and many small communities as well. So what are we doing to incentivize better behavior, to hold people accountable, and as Dwight said, for those good officers to hold the bad ones to account. We're beyond the point where this is just a couple of bad apples here. We have to look at how we're planting the orchard at this point, and we need some real standards in our police departments to prevent these type of things. It's pervasive. It's not one state. It's not one city. We need to do more. And I think our local communities, we see communities in Maryland stepping up. I think we are going to have to go piece by piece, as Reverend Yuri said, and make some real changes at local and to our local law enforcement, to our state's attorneys, to those counties who are funding them. And that's a way that we can start seeing some immediate changes outside of these tragedies, where we have to wait for justice.
CK, where might the shooting and killing of Dante Wright, this young man in Brooklyn Center, just north of Minneapolis, could this impact the Chauvin case, the jurors? Do you think?
Well, to the extent that and I'm not quite sure the jurors are sequestered.
Doesn't seem like
but
they are.
if they are, I'm not. That's an open question for me,
well, no,
and I haven't been able to get confirmation.
I haven't either. Well, if this helps at all, one juror was asked by the judge last week if she had heard anything about the case, and she had taped something on her DVR, and she said, I actually kind of bumped into something because my DVR, picked up, a news flash. Does that sound like they're sequestered?
No, it doesn't. If they're not sequestered, they're going to be influenced by it because, see, no matter what, the judge is going to tell them something that is ridiculous to believe that they wouldn't respect. Don't look at your phones. Don't read anything in the press. Don't do any research. Don't. And the first thing they're going to do when they go to the bathroom, if they have their phones, is they're going to look at the press. They're going to, because these jurors, much like the jurors in the OJ trial, are going to be celebrities. That's how they're going to perceive in part how they are. I mean, you got to think about it, because everyone is going to want to interview these jurors at the end of this trial, no matter what they decide. So these jurors know that. They understand that. They get it. So if they are not sequestered, of course they're going to be impacted by it. The question is, how are they impacted? If they're impacted in a way to say, my goodness, we've got to do something to stop this, we need change, we need to send a message, then they will convict and probably look at one of the higher sentences. Really, really convict. If they feel like it doesn't matter what we do, I mean, there's some people that feel this way. Doesn't matter what we do, maybe we should just wait for the federal legislation. That'll make a difference. And I just don't really feel that, all the evidence is so persuasive to send a poor police officer to jail. If they feel that way, then they will acquit, or somebody will hang the jury. And so with the defense, what we can expect when the defense puts on his case for probably 2 or 3 days, it's not going to be a long defense, because in the cross-examinations, the defense is basically put on his case. That's what you do when you cross-examine. You build your themes through the cross-examination, and then he'll have full, complete ability to put on and to fill in the gaps of the defense once the prosecution rests. And with the defense, probably right now, they know who their leader potentially is. So the defense is looking at, based on all the background observations of the jurors, looking at someone or two who will either hang the jury or would be a good leader in turning some jurors so that he is acquitted. So a leader is someone, and you can tell in voir dire when they're asking the question, and they took a lot of time picking the jury, right? Which is understandable in this case. You can tell by the way that people express themselves, by how much conviction they express in their opinions, how long they felt that way. You ask certain questions to get a sense of, is this person going to be a leader? Versus somebody who just kind of says yes or no and might be a follower, but not really stand firm. A leader is someone who you would get a sense of that person being a leader right away. And so they've cultivated who they feel, and it's all a guess, can be someone based on their background, responses, like in watching them at trial, and responses in voir dire would be good for them. And they're going to speak to that person. And they're going to tailor a lot of the examinations and everything to hit trigger points for the people who might be likely to hang or quit. So that's what the defense is going to do. and just continue to poke holes. They're going to, in cross-examination, they've been poking holes. So now what they're going to do, they're going to put it all together. They're going to piece everything together by their witnesses. And people like to say, well, what could they possibly say? There's not going to be, and you can't really refute that video. Oh, yes, you can. And oh, yes, they will. We may not think it's persuasive, but they can and they will do that. And that is why I said from the beginning, you just got to wait to hear all of the evidence, and meaning both sides being presented, but more importantly, it's not going to sway me, because I do trust my eyes. I know what I saw. But it's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about anybody on this panel. It's about those jurors. And if they're listening to, remember in the beginning, when we talked about this, Santita, I said, you know, when you're doing voir dire, you want to find out about their home life. If you've got a woman or man who feels intimidated by their spouse, that it would be a problem for them to go home, for that person to go home and to justify in their home acquitting or convicting a police officer, they're going to be persuaded by that because they got to live with that. They got to live with their decision. So, you know, there are a lot of factors that come into play when it comes to jury deliberations.
So they're not
that
in
they
the
got to live
courtroom alone. They are with they're bringing their homes and their communities with them. Tommy,
everything. Yep.
Tommy, what's on your mind today?
Well, first of all, Ms. Sandy, let me say good morning to you and good morning to your guests. And second of all, let me say, when it comes to the Chauvin trial, you're talking about what the world has witnessed. You're not talking about some video or somebody's adaptation of their phone experience circulating through our so-called media. You're talking about something that ranks up with some of the most heinous things that have ever happened in America, where individuals, instead of watching a movie, you're literally watching live a person beg for their lives. After they have been detained, after there are 3 individuals that are holding them, and they sit there for the sum total of how long it took for this man to die, and watch this individual cry out to his mother and die. Now, you're going to then tell me I got to be concerned about what my so-called husband is thinking, or some abusive spouse is thinking, or what I even care about a community? See, we're in a moralist society now, where certain things and stuff is just a prelude for us to go back and forth with the analytical analyzation of absolute stupidity. And the reason why these things continue to permeate in our society is based upon a clear narrative that I have said 1,000 times. The police departments in this country have been given an open writ to shoot and kill black people and don't worry about it. And that's why you see this kind of stuff. And at 15, as I close, one of the first lessons that I was sit down and told is that we're going to tell you something. If the police stop you, if you are accosted by the police, right or wrong, if they give you instructions and you don't follow them, you're going to send them to 100, and it's not going to end well for you. So I just want to say one simple thing. Unless this gutless country that we live in, unless these moral-minded individuals that crowd and use the Bible and say, one nation under God, actually starts to act like we live under God and start to say, hey, look, right is right and wrong is wrong. We do not have an opinion against the police. We need the police. Our opinion that is against overzealous police power, shooting unarmed individuals, doing things that you have police videos where they say police just do whatever they want. We can no longer sit back and allow this to happen. We can no longer sit back and allow pedophiles and stuff to just continue to go on about their business. We no longer can allow politicians to misuse the monies of states and then turn around and attack us again. And if it sounds like I'm on 10, well, I'll just drink some coffee and say I'm just an angry black man. Goodbye.
Tommy said a whole lot. Dwight McKee. There's a lot of pain there, a lot of anger. It's not just the pain. There's a lot of anger. You have, I mean, and we've had Spike Moss, we've had Reverend McAfee, we've had people from Minneapolis, St. Paul tell us, you guys, we've got a lot going on up here. And in the midst of all of this, before we can even get out of the weekend, we see this young man, this 20-year-old kid, pulled over for a traffic violation, and he ends up dead within minutes. Dwight, how is where do you expect this to go in Minneapolis? We already had hundreds of people who flooded the streets yesterday.
Uh, Again, it depends on how it'll go in different directions based on how the trial comes out. Tommy is angry, but and anger without power is just anger. And this is about power. This is about who's going to be in charge, who's going to remain in charge. And so the police are protected by the courts. They're protected by the unions. They're protected by the culture. They're protected by society. They are built-in protections. They're protected by the law. And so it's very hard to convict a policeman of any crime because society needs them to have the leadway to control the least of these. This is a society of the haves and the have-nots. But the haves have to have control of the have-nots to remain the haves. And so the police role is to make sure that they maintain control. The police are not out of control. They're maintaining control. And so everything in the system is set up to defend them and protect them. Otherwise, the society would not work the same way that it is set up to work. And so we can get as angry and as hostile as we want to. And unless we match our anger with power and with involvement and with what we call fight, this will go on and on and on and on. We keep thinking somehow that righteousness is going to play a role. And it may play a role over time. Someday, we shall overcome. But where we are now, this is about who has the power to make laws and who's going to remain in power to protect their interests and the interests of the people that they feel are important to themselves and society. So I can feel Tommy's anger, and I sympathize with it. But he's not the only one angry. There are millions of people are angry. The issue is not who's angry, it's who's in power and who's going to have control.
Well, what recourse do people have? I'll give you a minute, and then I'll give a minute to everybody else before we get out of here, Dwight. 60 seconds.
Well, you see, the recourse is they as we speak, they're marching in the streets, and that may degenerate into violence. It may not degenerate into violence, but a good start is what they've done in terms of changing the law in Baltimore and taking all of this away from the police and building in some consequences for their behavior. You have some of these people, Santita, who live and breathe to be bullies. And they got complexes, and they got mental issues, and they got personality disorders, and they join the police department so they can have a legal right to express now. And so you have to build in a mechanism to check and balance. You can't just, if they get a medal and a reward every time they kill a black person and are exalted, then you take the incentive away from them doing it from justice and fairness and equity. You have a society that is built on violence, built on control, and built on power. And democracy is a subtext, and justice and fairness is a subtext to all of that. The mythology is built around the justice and the but everything the reality is built around the power.
Absolutely. Aaron, in 1 minute, your final thoughts. What are you going to be looking for as we go into this, into what might be the final week of
Well,
this year?
I'm going to be praying for those jurors who have the power to make this very important and symbolic decision for our country, and decide how we are going to measure justice. So I will pray for their empathy, and for their objectivity in what we see in the facts of this case. That a man was murdered by a police officer, and that our system of justice should not operate that way. That's what I am praying for. I hope that all of your listeners, your morning stars, that all of your frequent guests, I pray for the same, that we all have some peace and some time to really process what we're seeing and feeling. There's a lot of emotions. I know we're talking tomorrow about another tragic case in Chicago where a 13-year-old boy was killed by police. There's a lot going on here. And my hope and what I hope to see from humanity in this moment is that we all embrace each other and we all think about how we can do a little bit better. It's overwhelming. It can be difficult. So I'm just wishing that for all of you this morning.
About the Toledo family today and the Wright family. Oh, my goodness, all of these families. I've got less than about 30 seconds, C.K. Hoffler. And, of course, tomorrow you will be on your own show. You'll be back on this show. But you'll be on your own show on WAOK at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, talking about these issues. 30 seconds, they belong to you.
Absolutely. We have to do three things. One, we've got to make sure the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is passed. One. Two, we have to really continue the grassroots efforts, continue the protests. They should be nonviolent, but continue the protests. And three, we have to take responsibility as citizens and who we elect. We've got to vote people. We know who these police commissioners are. We know the people that we're electing. We need to take responsibility. Do not elect people who are permeating a corrupt system. So those are the three things we have to do. And we also have to pray for our country, because all hell is going to break loose if Derek Chauvin is acquitted. That's all I can say.
The people in Little Village here in Chicago, they're hurting. They had a 13-year-old child, a son of that community, killed. And we don't know why. Yep. And it's happening every day all over the country. Come on, everybody. You've got to come together. Register to vote. Get involved. This society is built on the concept of self-governance. We're the ones in charge here. That's right. Leadership doesn't come from the White House. It comes from your house. Not from the State House. Not from the City Hall house. From your house. Get out there. Get involved. Be peaceful. And make the change and be the change that you want to see. Let's come on and let's make a more perfect union. I'm Santita Jackson. I'll be with you tomorrow. God bless. God willing. Thank you, Gary Hines and the Sounds of Blackness. We will be victorious. I'm Santita Jackson. God bless. I love you, everybody. Thank you so much. And thank you, Bab. Bab said this is a perspective that, he said, great discussion. Can't find this perspective anywhere. I want you to explain that to me, Bab, before I jump out of here. I've got to run because I got to go see my dad. You know, I've become like part of his therapy team, his speech therapy team. So I've got to go meet his speech therapist right now. And so I'm going to be running. CK and Dwight and Aaron, I want to thank you, Aaron. I'll speak with you a little bit later, so that I can so we can work out some people who can talk about what's happening here in Chicago. Phew. I love you, everybody. So have I let everybody go, Dwight? I mean, Devin. Well, I tell you what, I'm going to run now. I love you, everybody. Love you, love you, love you. And so, love you, love you, love you, love you, love you, love you, love you. I'll see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. God bless everybody. Bye-bye.